Welcome to another episode of the Dani Ariza podcast. Today I'm with Ruma Mazumdar.
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize if I said it wrong.
All good. Mazumdar.
Mazumdar. There you go. There you go. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I have been following you on Instagram for a while. Very, I like what I see. Lots of knowledge, lots of cool stuff. I mean, you're very authentic online.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That has been my word of the year, so I'm glad it's showing up even online.
Yeah, I think it's easier to be authentic online. A lot of people try to be something else, and sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. Yeah. But if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself,
Sure. So a little bit about myself. Like, where do I start? Day to day, I'm a real estate attorney, and I own my own firm. It's called Key Esquire. I recently actually added on estate planning, so I guess I can call myself a real estate and estate planning attorney. We have a all-women team of 4 and growing, which is always exciting. And the firm I started at the end of 2021, so it's been 22, 23, 24.
I don't know, 4 years.
Yeah, just over 4 years. I'm not good at math, which is why I went to law school, despite being South Asian.
Yeah.
And, now I feel like I've really shifted to, being more of like the business owner mindset too in having my own firm. I loved, being an attorney and guiding my clients and educating them and whatnot. But I recently also hired an attorney to help me do more of that so we can reach more people. And I can start focusing on estate planning, which is like basically how I see, part 2 of like the journey that my clients, go on, from buying their first property often and then thinking about how to create generational wealth and protect their investments and their families and all of that. So I've kind of shifted to the bigger topics as I also go through my own education of like money and mindset. Because a lot of that comes up, especially coming from both my parents are immigrants. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. So how has that transition been from just going solo to like now basically you're a CEO?
Yeah. So it took a long time just because, anyone that wants to start something of their own think that they can do it better than anyone else, and like letting go and delegating is really difficult. And I had that problem, I would say, in the beginning, and because you think about reputation and your branding and customer service, like being top notch. So like, at least if you know that like you're the person doing it, there's no one else to blame.
Yeah, that's all right.
Cut.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
So when you're doing it, there's no one else to blame. But then when you start kind of delegating to other people and something goes wrong, or you get some like bad feedback, you get a little in your head about it. And then I try to micromanage everything all over again. But now I've just gotten to a place of, the firm has grown, it's built its reputation. Everyone knows I have a team, which is really nice. So not everyone's expecting Ruma on the phone all the time, Ruma to be answering the emails, Ruma to be doing, the contract reviews. And that's been a great way for me to also transition into the more CEO role, which is doing a lot more operations and systems and making sure that the customers get served, in the way that we want to, with high standards. Nothing falls through the cracks. We pay attention to the details, and we're able to just do a lot more for them, especially as an attorney, I charge a flat fee, but we provide so much value in what we do too, that I often think like real estate attorneys are like the most underpaid in a transaction with how much we do. And especially like Key Esquire, particularly how much we do for our clients.
I mean, I think it's I'm kind of dealing with it myself right now, where it's like it's so hard to let go of duties. Like you do realize that, look, I need to grow, and the only way to grow is if I actually delegate. And if I actually trust other people. But it's really like a mental thing. It's the mindset of changing, going from like, okay, you have a job to actually a business.
Right.
And it's just so difficult. I mean,
and especially if you've been an employee, like I was an employee since, I had a job in high school, but I was basically an employee since, I had my first job at 17. And then I opened my practice when I was 31. So going from like employee mindset to like business owner, entrepreneur is like, it is such a shift.
Yeah, I mean, there's like right now I'm going through a process where like I'm trying to set up processes to make sure that people do things the right way all the time, and it's difficult. It's a grind because at the same time, when there's an issue, it's like no, I'll take care of it. I'll just fix it.
I know, I can do it myself. It's
I
like,
can do it myself.
you know, it'll take me 5 seconds to do instead of me sitting here and explaining it. But honestly, like that's where you do have to stop, pause, because if you keep getting stuck in those 5-second tasks, you're just never going to be able to like be in that visionary strategic role. And also that role of like for your clients, right? To spot the bigger issues, to work on the more complicated deals, and just give them like that sort of advice as opposed to worrying about like, was this document submitted properly yet?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So now let's backtrack a little bit. So you know, how did you decide to go into law school? What were you doing before law school? Like, where did you go to school? Actually?
Okay, so I went to, I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Clifton and then in Monmouth County later on. And I went to NYU for college. So
Nice.
yeah, I've always been like pretty local, East
I like
Coast.
NYU, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I worked in the West Village.
Yeah.
On Sheridan Square for 15 years.
Yep.
That was kind of like I was working the Chase and JP Morgan branch right there. So
Yep.
I love NYU.
That city energy is, you know, amazing. So, and NYU for some reason was always my dream school. I kind of grew up going to Rockefeller Center, going to see the tree, and I was like, I want to go to school in New York. And then you see like NYU campus in like the movies and stuff like that. And like off of that, I was like, I'm going to NYU.
Yeah.
So that's where I started. And I went into law because unfortunately I failed at being a doctor, or at least failed at like my pre-med studies in my freshman year. So it was like very early on that I had to like face the fact that I was no longer like the smartest person in the class, you know? And that was like really hard. But I was like, okay, well, at least I have another reputable kind of profession that I'm looking into to see if I'm interested, because I started college in 2008, which is when the recession happened.
Yeah.
And coming from a family in real estate and lending, the whole system was like decimated for a little bit.
Yeah, it was tough. Yeah.
So I was in school full time and then working part time for a solo attorney, actually. And when I started to fail like my pre-med coursework, the class that I was failing was physics. That's when I basically decided it was time to make a decision and withdraw from that class, because there was no way I was going to get an F on my college transcript.
Yeah.
Like college is entirely too expensive to be failing. So I had to figure out a pivot really quickly. And I was like, I don't hate my part-time job. I'm getting paid good money back then. You know, it was like $100 a week. And I was like, oh my God, amazing, for like, you know, 15, 20 hours of work or whatever. And I was like, I'm going to look into this. And so I started like cold calling attorneys all over the city. The one thing about attorneys is they love talking about themselves. So I just called and said, hey, I'm a student at NYU. I'm a freshman. I'm thinking about becoming an attorney one day. Like, do you have any advice? And I called people like that were, you know, practicing in big law firms to even like small solo attorneys too. So I was just getting like kind of information about everything in between. And that's really, I think, what kicked off my journey into the law. And the one piece of advice that that I got from like everyone was, go get real world experience before going to law school. So that was fun to tell my parents, hey, one, I'm not going to become a doctor. Yeah. Shattering South Asian parents' dreams. Yeah. And I had to like also admit, like, I'm just not smart enough, you know?
I mean, it's not for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah. I can tell you myself, like, I was okay in school and I could get myself into reading stuff when it comes to math or other subjects, science. Like there was nothing fun about it. Like it was like absolutely like it would just, what is this?
Yeah.
But some people that's just the way it is, you know?
Exactly. It was like a foreign language, right? So like someone that goes to law school is not going to feel the same way about like, you know, going to med school. Like it's different languages, and the med school track was just the language I didn't understand. The law, however, kind of sort of made sense to me. So I was like, I'm going to go in this direction. So I had to break the news to my parents, who were like completely upset. And you would think, though, they would be like, oh, well, at least she's still picking another reputable profession. It's not like I was like, oh, I'm going to go to like the NYU dance school now or something. No offense to them. Like they are also very fantastic, or like the music school or something like that. And then on top of that, I also was delivering the news that I wasn't going to apply to law school straight through, based on all of the conversations and all of the internships I eventually had during college. And they were just like, what did we do here? Like, where did we go wrong?
Yeah. So you did, so did you go to NYU Law, or you went someplace else?
So after NYU, did 4 years there, graduated, I moved to DC and I worked as a paralegal at like the top firm in DC. And then I came back to the city and I went to Cardozo Law.
Oh, Cardozo. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after that, what came after law school?
So that was, so law school, basically, when I started at Cardozo, you know, one of the things I always say is I got paid to become an attorney because I went on a full scholarship. So I almost felt like I could dabble in a lot of different things and not feel the pressure of like, I have to like I have to like work super hard, work myself to the bone. Like I could kind of explore different subject matters, different types of law, different types of internships. So I kind of took advantage of that in not having the pressure of like, you know, I got to make sure like I'm getting what I'm paying for essentially. But somehow I still just ended up in a traditional track of you go to law school, you graduate to work at a big law firm in New York City, the Golden Handcuffs. You know, I started out at 2 big firms in the city where I worked for 4 years before I then started my own practice.
How is it working at those big firms? And like, you know, I always hear stories.
Just like Suits.
Yeah.
Just, no, just
well, I've never watched Suits, but sorry. But yeah, like I always hear stories. Like I know a lot of investment bankers, and that's like a crazy. And I also hear a lot of like, you know, attorneys. It's like, okay, my God, like, you know, I just had a friend who I was like, hey, bro, just try to work only 80 hours a week, you know, and it's like nuts.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you're getting paid good money, but sometimes you don't have a life. You know?
No, and that's exactly what it is. Like I was fortunate enough where I was at 2 firms that did give us some work-life balance, but when it came time to like preparing for trial, because I started in litigation. So when it came time to prepare for trial, it was just, you were working 24/7 around the clock. Didn't matter how many hours you had even clocked for the day. It's like whatever needed to get done for the trial prep, you slept through. Or you just like worked through. And there was days where I would just go home literally like to shower and then come back and be in the office. And it didn't happen often. You know, I would say there's also like a thrill of sometimes working that hard and preparing for a trial. But in the end, it's just not sustainable, you know, especially if you want to have relationships outside of work, if you want to have a family, if you want to have friendships, you know, because it's just like it gets to a point where you're just working all the time and then you like just sleep when you can, you know, and then the people you work with are your friends. But
yeah, I mean, it's tough. Those, like you said, it's just not sustainable. It's definitely tough on
but the thing is, right, it's for certain people. Certain people are built for like, this is what I want. Like, this is the dream for me. For me, after 4 years of like working really hard, I was getting really good at like what I was doing. I worked on a great team. I was at a great firm. I even worked with one of my really good friends, you know? So like, I was like, I can't really complain all that much. But what got me was the fact that I had, if someone like outside was looking in, they would be like, oh, like she's got the ideal situation in law firm life. A supportive boss who's like, you know, supporting her onto the track of like partnership and everything. And I had all of that. And I was just like, this is not actually what I want. Yeah. You know, like this is not fulfillment to me. This is not what makes me happy at the end of the day. I didn't know what was going to make me happy either. Don't get me wrong. But I also was like, this is also not it.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like that, you know. It's like I was just having a conversation with the other guest where he was, you know, I was talking about how much golf I play. And he was like, oh my God, you're like, you have, you know, you do what you love. And I was telling him basically I got to this point after many years of just doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Where like, you know, I made some sacrifices and I said to myself, okay, I'm not, maybe we don't have these, but I have this, you know, and I feel like, listen, you have to go through it.
Yeah. To really know what's important.
To really know what's important. Yeah. To really know. Cause I mean, I can imagine like that. How was that? Like, I mean, how can you have I mean, I know a lot of people do it, but it's hard to have a personal life, relationships and all of that.
And so much of like being an attorney or a doctor or whatever, like your identity gets wrapped up in like what your profession is and how you identify yourself. And it's funny because like even now more and more, I'm like, I actually don't really care about being recognized as an attorney. You know, I love the fact that I get to say I'm a business owner. You know, that I have created a work culture, that I have a team of people, that I get to service clients in a certain way, you know, all just built by the way that I think, you know, a business should be run.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, it's like your own baby.
Yeah.
You know, exactly. Like the business is your own baby. You have to teach the business how to walk and run and do.
Seriously.
do all sorts of things. So now you mentioned obviously you do real estate and now estate planning. What do you used to do when you were working at the firms? At the firms.
So a lot of it was some form of like real estate litigation background. Like it always touched upon real estate, but a lot of it just stemmed from breach of a contract. And then we were representing commercial landlords, hotel owners, restaurant owners, for basically like breach of contract issues. Then I started to really niche down into representing hotel owners in breach of management agreements, meaning the hotel owner would have like a big brand on there, you know, like a Hilton or Marriott, and for some reason the hotel wouldn't be performing. So we would basically sue for something within the management contract.
I see. So is that the reason, or what is the reason why when you decided to leave the big law firms to go into real estate law?
So I would definitely say it was like conversations with my mom and a push from my mom. She's a business owner herself, and
what does she do? Mortgages or
mortgages? Yeah. So I mean, she does like operations now. Like she has a lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, she does. So she barely works now. But she also saw me working like the crazy hours. I never took a vacation. I would have my laptop at Thanksgiving, at Christmas. Like I just like was never able to shut off. And I had like 2 bouts of alopecia where like I didn't lose all my hair, but like all of these stress indicators of, you know, bad health because of my job environment were showing up. And she was just like, if this is what makes you happy and makes you feel accomplished, like go for it. But like, really, is this what you want? And like, she was the one to like make me like think, because all of this was happening in the midst of the pandemic too.
Yeah.
And I think everyone had a hard look at life in those moments, you know? So that was what kind of was the game changer. And I ended up in real estate because I feel like, you know, my mom was like, why don't you just start a firm and start in real estate, see if you like it, and start doing closings. And I was like, at first I was like, well, I'm so used to doing like more complicated law, you know, and now I feel like this will be really easy. And she's like, yeah, why can't your job be easy? And I was like, yeah, why can't my job be easy?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we just complicate ourselves, you know, like I, even myself, sometimes where I had a couple of years where I was like, oh, I want to grow a team and I want to do these big things and just be like the number one ever. And then you start realizing, maybe I don't want that. You know, maybe the only reason I want that is because of what other people might think.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, I don't know if it's the same, but you mentioned that your parents had how they wanted you to be a doctor and stuff. And it's like, sometimes you're doing things for what other people want and not supposed to what you want. And it just takes a while to actually realize it yourself, because it doesn't matter what anybody tells you.
Yeah.
It's just like,
I mean, that's been a lot of things that I've been unpacking too since like starting my own firm, is not seeking other people's approval. I feel like for most of my life, that's what I was doing, you know, whether it was the person who was my boss, my coworkers, my parents, my family, I was always seeking approval. And when I started my business, all of those lessons like started coming up, because everyone had an opinion about like, how much should you charge? You should do it like this. This attorney does it like this. Oh, why aren't you, why aren't you doing it this way? Like, and it was all just like, I don't want to. You know, I want to do it the way I want to do it, you know? And then it took a really long time for people to even just be like, oh, okay, she knows what she's doing, you know? After I put in the reps, after like people started seeing Key Esquire, after people started seeing, oh, she's hiring, you know? And I was like, I guess I'm like onto something, you know? Even as I was growing, like I still didn't even have the confidence in myself that I was doing it the right way or the way I should be doing it. But like, I don't think that doesn't matter, right?
I mean, there's really no right way.
Right.
Yeah. I'm kind of going through it, and I've had the different ventures for the past. I mean, I've been in mortgages and financial services for like 20 years. But even with the podcast, when I started, you know, people were like, oh no, you should do this, you should do that, you know, and like, then I realized, no, I'm just gonna do it what comes out, you know, what feels right.
Right. And that's like being authentic, right? To yourself, right. Because that's what people ultimately want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a fun process, I have to say. It's a fun process.
Most of the time, right?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah. So, what would be your advice, and I've seen videos of you posting this, but what would be your advice to a first-time home buyer now? I mean, the market is so difficult. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, when it comes to real estate law, what is that one thing that just comes up and be like, hey, you got to do this?
Yeah. Definitely building resilience.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, it's a.
But I think like preparation is key, right? Vetting all of the individuals you're going to work with. And the biggest thing is the financial piece. You need to know what your budget is. You need to know your income, your debts. Like you need to know where your money is going and what you can actually afford, right? So talking to someone like you is definitely the first step, I would say, in the home buying process.
Yeah.
And because also a realtor is not going to take you seriously until you have that pre-approval as well, right?
Yeah.
And being able to, like, numbers can be scary, but having a basic understanding of numbers is also really important, right? Because especially now, like, people have to, like, they see a listing price and then they have to bid over it and it gets competitive. And understanding, like, what it means when you're waiving an appraisal, when you're waiving certain rights, you know, in a contract. So it's really important to prepare to talk to the right professionals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I personally think that nowadays more than ever, really, because I mean, I went through the 2000 to 2005 boom before the crash, and it wasn't like this where like people are just waiving their rights to just get into a property. Mm-hmm. You know, basically right now there's so many things there's so many questions. Legal questions that come into mind where like I get sometimes, you know, a buyer asking me, hey, what's going to happen with my deposit? I'm like, look, let's talk to an attorney.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I could tell you from experience, but let's talk to an attorney. You know, it's important to have a team of experienced individuals who actually are doing the right thing for you. Yeah. And honestly, the biggest thing is just to have an attorney that's there to make sure that they guide you on that legal aspect, because that's the biggest fear of everyone. Hey, am I going to lose my deposit? What happens if, you know, something goes wrong? Like, hey, am I going to get in trouble for this or that? And it just...
I know. And the other thing is, like, there's, like, so much misinformation out there, too, like, on TikTok, on Instagram. And I think those places, like social media, is a good place to start. But at the end of the day, you should speak to a professional, right? Also, AI is incredible. I'm like a huge proponent of it, but it does not replace like true professional guidance, you know? Yeah. And it's not an attorney. So
every situation is different. Everyone's going back to the same thing with the business and your ventures. Every single situation is different, and you need to have somebody who's going to be able to look at the whole picture and say, okay, this is the solution for you.
That's the biggest thing too I've run up against. Like the clients will come to me during a contract consultation and they're like, you know, if anything happens, I can get my deposit back, right? It won't be a big deal. Like my real estate agent said it won't be a big deal, or like my loan officer said it won't be a big deal. And I was like, I can't tell you if it'll be a big deal or not, because it depends on what happens in your transaction. And I was like, no transaction is the same, because no house is the same.
Yeah.
You know,
no seller is the same.
No seller is the same. And people will be like, well, do you know? I'm like, and on top of that, I'm like, I don't know anything about this seller because I don't talk to them.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe you met them at an open house, and I'm sure they like felt warm and fuzzy at that point, but like they're trying to sell you something, they are going to be warm and fuzzy. But it's like when the contract comes into play, that's when everyone's like true colors come out. And that's why it's like super important to know, what limits what risks are you okay with too. I think that's another thing, right? Like even if you have a budget in mind, you're pre-approved for a certain number, you also have to be like, do I have to budget for other appliances down the line? Yeah. Like this home is really old. The AC is like 25 years old, but it's working fine right now, but it could go kaput the day after closing. Like, do you have money to replace that? Like I feel like people just want the keys, and they don't think about like the commitment that they're actually making.
I'll tell you a story. I bought my house in 2021. It's a bi-level home in Bridgewater. And when it was the summer, so they put the heat, they put the AC, and it was great, right? But then when the winter came in, we realized that, the owner was one lady that was living there for a long time, but they only had one unit for the whole house. And basically in the winter, if you're in the first floor, which is there's no basement, it is freezing. And all the heat goes up. So on the second floor, it's hot.
Yep.
And way hotter. And on the first floor, there's like no heat. Mm-hmm. That was an expense that we had to basically get another unit to go ahead and put in the ceiling in the attic.
Right.
So those are things that sometimes people just don't think about. And the other thing is important to, like, I always, at least myself, I tell people, look, there's always ranges. Like people come to me and tell me, oh, how much am I going to pay? I'm like, look, you're going to pay from this to this. Mm-hmm. Why? I don't know how much the insurance is going to be. I could give you an estimate, but I don't know.
Yep.
Interest rates could change up until the last moment until we decide.
Yep.
Or something else comes up. So yeah, having the guidance of the right real estate attorney, the right loan officer, the right real estate agent, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
It like impacts the transaction so much when you have like the right team.
Yeah.
Because even if everything is going wrong, which happens, if I'm working with the right team, we always figure it out in some way.
That's another thing. You're just having that mentality of like, hey, let's find a solution.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now let me ask you, how come you started doing estate planning? How did you decide to go into that part?
Yeah. So that was like a natural need that my clients kept calling me back about. They were like, hey, can you do a will for me? Can you do a will for me? And I always like outsourced it because I was like, I'm just so busy with like the transactions. I didn't want to pull my attention. I didn't have the resources to. Now I have an attorney in place who is, has been doing real estate herself for 5 years. So I'm like, okay, now I can start, looking at estate planning. So I, for the last couple of years have been educating myself in that realm. And then I partnered with an attorney local to New Jersey as well, local to the Middlesex County area. And we handle estate planning for our clients. And it's so cool because a lot of them now are thinking that way, starting to think that way. I also introduced the concept early on in the transaction too. Like as soon as we get under contract, I remind them that like this is a big investment. You should start thinking about protecting it. You should especially be thinking about it if you have children, because a lot of the people that I'm helping they're renters. And they're upsizing now because they've like gotten married or like they have a child on the way. And, the estate planning piece always is like down the road. I'll do it later on. Like it's not super important. But in the real estate realm, I'm trying to educate them that it's equally as important. Like it's as urgent as attorney review.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to backtrack again. So what is estate planning really? Mm-hmm. Like what does that cover?
Yeah.
We always think will, but what else is out there? Wow.
Estate planning is like the mechanism for legally having your wishes in a place where if anything happened to you, this is what I want to happen. This is who I want to make decisions. This is who I want to get my things. This is how my business should keep running. If I'm in a coma, this is what I want.
I see. So now, I mean, you mentioned, I guess, when will be the right time to start thinking about estate planning? Is it just when you have kids or like any moment when you have a certain amount of money?
I think when you feel like you have something worth protecting. Mm-hmm. Like I have a business And I quickly started thinking about a succession plan, right? Like if for some reason, God forbid, I get hit by a car, what happens to my 65 clients? You know?
I need you.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to have your entity documents in shape to let people know, to designate a successor, to take care of, you know, whatever needs to happen, however you want it to happen, right? If I pass away, it's like, do I want my firm to keep running, or do I want someone to wrap it up and close it down? Or do I want someone to sell it? You know, like all of these things are just questions right now because like I might not have a plan in place, you know? So if people like, especially nowadays, like everyone has some sort of side hustle.
Yeah.
Or someone's trying to start a venture, you know, all the time. A lot of people are getting out of that 9-to-5 employee mentality. But, you know, especially like younger people, young professionals, they have a lot of assets, you know, like we've grown up at a time where like real estate investing is like the accessible thing to do, you know? But I still have so many clients who will purchase real estate in their personal names, like an investment property in their personal names. And part of estate planning is also knowing that like all of your assets are set up in the correct structure, right? Like, do you need a trust? Do you need an LLC? Do you need a holding corp? It's like evaluating everything that has like your name on it and how you're going to protect it if anything ever happened to you.
Yeah. So question, because I could see some people thinking, okay, hey, when I need stuff like that, I go to an accountant. You know, and I think sometimes
even a financial advisor, everyone's trying to sell estate planning services
exactly,
now.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, you know, are those the right people to talk to, or should you be talking to a real estate to estate planning attorney? Like,
yeah, I think one, you should be talking to a mix, right? Someone who is like, for example, if you're an avid real estate investor and you have a couple of properties under your belt, it's like you want to talk to a business attorney and you want to talk to maybe even a tax attorney and you want to talk to an estate planning attorney, right? You want to cover it all. And that's what I do too. Like I have professionals that I will bring into the conversation based on your net worth or what assets you have and how it's currently set up so that we can either fix the structure or prepare you with the right structure if you tell us like, this is my end goal, right? So I think sure, you can talk to your accountant about it. A lot of accountants will form an LLC. I mean, you can go online and form your own LLC. But what's important is that operating agreement. And people will pull templates offline, Rocket Lawyer.
All the time.
All the time, you know, like it's so easy to find. But one, a lot of these templates are only valid in certain states. It's not drafted per like what's going on in your life, in your transaction with your assets. And so I think that's like the big missing piece, because a lot of times one of my clients will be like, oh, my CPA will form it for me. I was like, okay, that's fine, but are they going to give you an operating agreement? And they're like, yeah, they like give me a standard form. And I take a look at it and I was like, this doesn't do anything for you, you know? So that's been like a new kind of package I've introduced into my practice too, is like LLC formation with a tailored operating agreement too is important.
So now, I have a couple of small businesses. I got 2 kids, my wife.
You got a plan?
I do not. Which is, by the way, that's the reason why I initially reached out to you, because I was like, you know, me and my wife are always running around, and it's something that we just.
Yeah, you said she travels a lot for work.
Yeah, she travels a lot for work, and it's like the first 6 months of the year, it's like nuts, and then this next 6 months is like kind of like recovering from the first 6 months.
Yeah.
And we just never thought about it, but then I was thinking, you know, what happens if we pass away? Like, so. I guess.
And it's the other thing is like, sorry to cut you off, right? It's not just about when you pass away. And I think that's been like the kind of misnomer out there too, that estate planning only matters if you die. But it's also a plan like while you're living, right? Like if anything happens to you, you get disabled, you get into a car accident, right? Like you're still living, you know? But the estate planning or like certain documents only kick in after you die. But there are living, breathing documents that we still like have as part of your estate plan that dictate what happens like while you're still living too.
So I guess my question would be, so you have a will and a living will, right? Or how does it?
Yeah, a living will or like an advance directive, basically being like, you know, if something were to happen to you and you're basically, it's like a terminal situation. Like, do you want them to pull the plug? Do you want them to keep giving you life sustaining measures? Like, what is it that you want? So the will kick in when you pass away.
When I pass away.
It'll say, this is my executor, which is the person that you're going to give the job to sort out everything that you left behind.
And the executor, what's the difference between the executor and the administrator? The executor is actually the will, right?
Yes. When you have no plan, you have like what's called an administrator. Yeah. And that is, basically it's going to be by state law what happens, who's the next of kin, who's your next heir. They're going to be the person that has to like go to the court and prove, this is who I am.
I see. And then
that's my mom that passed away, like that. And then they get the administrative rights. When you have a will, you name an executor.
Okay. And what is probate?
So probate is the process of like validating your actual will and getting your executor getting the authority, official authority, to then execute on behalf of your estate.
And I always hear a lot of people that say, hey, I want to avoid probate. Like, what is that about? What's the disadvantage of going to the probate?
So I think that came about because of the trusts, like all of these different types of trusts that can be put into place. The thing about New Jersey is the probate process is actually not super complicated if you have a simple, estate, meaning like minimal assets. You have like a will in place. Your executor is someone you trust. They know what they're doing, and they're able to just carrying out like closing your accounts, maybe selling your house, like simple stuff, right? When it becomes like messy is one when there's no plan and everything gets tied up in the court system for however long until they can figure out like who has the actual right to things. And that's when people, when they say I want to avoid probate, it's basically just like avoiding having to go to court. So then there's estate planning mechanisms like a revocable trust that you can put in place.
And I hate to keep asking, and kind of like, but it's like, So, and what's the difference between revocable and irrevocable trust, and why should I have one, I guess? So
the revocable trust is like a living trust in the now. You manage it yourself, like you're a co-trustee of it. Versus the irrevocable trust, you're basically giving up all control, and the trustee that you name is like a third party. So that's used in more complicated planning scenarios, Medicare, Medicaid stuff, tax advantages in certain scenarios.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, all these things, it's just, those are things that you never think about until something actually happens.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people that have to go through it in the end, like, on their own, then they realize how important it is. But it's like you said, until you go through it, you have no idea what a mess it could be.
Yeah. And it's, I don't think it's good for me to say this, but working in a bank for many years, I saw how many people, like, when they pass away, they didn't have any beneficiaries, and then they would come in and be like, okay, I don't have, the letters of testamentary, I don't have anything. Where do I go? And it's like you're dealing with, grieving the death of someone. Yeah. And then you also have to basically, hey, we just left you a mess.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing that, like, people while they're living don't think about, right? What's the impact it's going to have on, like, you pass away, how's that going to leave your wife? Yeah. Is she going to be clear-headed enough to be like, let me jump in and, like, figure out the estate, right? People forget that people are grieving, like they've lost someone, right? And your debts could keep piling up. Your businesses need to keep running. Like, your children still need to go to school. None of that stops, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think sometimes, like, my wife is super smart, but when it comes to, like, certain stuff, she has, like, no idea. She was like, okay, I don't know, I don't know anything about that. And there are so many people like that too.
Yeah, no, and I see that all the time with, like, couples too, right? Like, the husband is the one kind of in charge of, like, the wife is sitting there, right? Of course, but it's like, oh, he's in charge of, like, getting all of this in place. But then it's educating both of them equally to be like, hey, if you passed away, like, this is how your job will kick in, and if you passed away, that's how your husband's job will kick in.
So now, question. So, and God forbid this never happens, but for example, me and my wife, what happens if we both pass away? Like, how do we go about like naming someone to take care of our kids? Which document is that? Or
Yeah, so you can do that through the will. You could do it through a trust. It's called naming a guardian.
naming? Okay.
Yeah. So you decide, if you have siblings, like if one of them wants to be the guardian. A lot of people have godparents, when their children are born, so they'll name them. And then they'll create a trust depending on, until the child is like 18 or 21 or 25, like this is all the money for them to be used for their care and maintenance and schooling and all of that stuff.
So I'm basically able to say, okay, for example, like, okay, the executor of my estate is going to go ahead and sell the house and put that into a trust. And that's the money that's going to take care of the kids.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or you can be like, I want my kids to remain in the house. That's an option too. And then you kind of have to, figure out with the godparents, like, you're gonna have to move into my house now.
Yeah. I got it. It's such I could see how many I know a lot of people that just avoid talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, death is not sexy.
Yeah, it's not like,
But it is, inevitable.
Yeah.
Right? And you want to just have peace of mind. You want to make sure that the people you love have a plan in place for them, right? And so it is important. I mean, but the thing is, like, it's like once you go through the process of doing it, like I talk to each of my clients, they spend 1 hour going through all of their assets and stuff. And I'm like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like that was like really dark and dreary? They're like, no, I finally know where like all my bank accounts are, where all of my assets are, where all my investments are. Like I have like this organized packet of stuff because like you made me just do a little bit of homework one weekend.
Yeah.
And now I have a plan and I don't have to worry. And then they're like, and you will call me up every 3 years to be like, any changes? What do we need to update? They're like happy. Like, they're like, oh, that's like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah. So how would the process be? So like, like I called you and do we sit down, go over like all my finances? How does it work?
Yeah. So you call in and you just let me know, hey, I'm thinking about a plan. A lot of times people have read stuff online. So I'm like, tell me a bit about what you read online. What are you thinking for your plan? And then we set up what's called like a design consultation, and it's paid because we're giving actual legal advice and recommendation at the end. So that takes about 45 minutes to an hour, and sometimes it can take more, especially if the estate is more complicated. There's more assets to worry about. Blended families, different scenarios. Someone has a business, they have a lot of property. So it just depends on what factors are involved and what your life actually is, right? And we go through all of that. We send you a worksheet beforehand. It probably has like 25, 30 questions to get you in the mindset of like the information we're going to talk about. Some people will sit down and populate all of that for me. Otherwise, some people don't. And they're like, I populate all of that for them during the actual meeting.
Yeah.
So it just depends on, what they're comfortable with, right? Like the ones who are like, let's just talk about it during the meeting, or like, so I have to do a little bit more work on that one. But then there's some who send me like a spreadsheet beforehand being like, these are all my assets. This is what the worth is right now, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, great. Now you've built yourself a little like vault of your information. Like, how hard was that?
Yeah.
And then at the end of that hour, we give them a recommendation and say, at this point in time, if something were to happen to you tomorrow, this would be the best plan for you.
I see.
And then we deliver in 30 days.
Oh, okay. Now, and I guess just arrange, because I guess it's important for like some people to know, because they at least in the past, people, because I have thought about it and talking to other people, they think of estate planning like, hey, this is something for the rich. And then they go like, hey, how much does that cost? That sounds like it costs a ton of money. And I'm sure like it depends on everyone, but like range wise, this could go from like what, like a few $1,000s to like.
Yeah. So, like our single clients, like 2,000 and up, single clients, if you're married, it starts at like 4,000 and up. And that's, there's entry level, and then there's of course the more specialized knowledge you need, the more expensive it gets.
Yeah. Cause it's
an investment though, right? Like anything, right? You're spending. And when you think about it, right, at the end of the day, we do a calculation with my client of like, this is your net worth, right? With all your life insurance policies, how much your house is worth, how much your cars are worth, what you have in savings, what you have in your stock brokerage accounts, what you have with your 401k. And that number at the end might sometimes they're surprised what it adds up to. And I'm like, you know, $4 million estate and you're paying like a couple $1,000s to protect it. Like,
yeah, because you know what, it's one thing I learned being in the financial services industry is that a lot of people have amassed a nice chunk of money.
And sometimes they don't even know it.
They don't even know it. They don't really realize that, hey, this is a lot of money. Like I used to get people come in and be like, hey, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I have some savings. I'm like, yeah, just bring the statements. We'll sit down. We'll go over your scenario, see what could be better. Come in, it's like, oh, yeah, $3 million. and it's like, yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot. You know, I think that, you know, I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like you don't have people walking. It's not like not everyone has $25 million out there. Like, you know, this is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, like you said, it's something that the price it's a small price to pay for a peace of mind.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a small price to pay for a peace of mind. So now, changing the subject. What is next for Key Squire? Like, what is there any big exciting things to come besides keep growing, of course?
Yeah, I mean, I just hit like a huge milestone in adding another attorney to my firm, so that is a huge milestone for me. You know, you can make a plan, but sticking to it and seeing it actually come to fruition is a moment that I want to just, you know, stop and pause for. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that, which will, you know, allow me, I've like quote unquote bought back my time now. So then I can focus on the things that I enjoy doing, growing the estate planning practice, and really just continuing to serve more people.
Yeah.
I love educating. I think there's not enough out there about estate planning in general that's approachable.
Yeah.
So that's been like one of my missions is to break down the stereotypes of it being, like you said, like for the rich, for the old, for only the wealthy, you know. I want it to be something that's like as common as buying a house, essentially, right? Like I want that to be like a pair of things that like go together. Yeah. And so that's kind of like my new mission now. And I think a lot of it also stems from breaking through a lot of these like money mindset barriers. Like people are afraid to talk about those things, and educating more on that too, and having like an open conversation about it, I feel like, because it's important. Yeah.
I think it's you know, you hit in a good point where you know, I come from immigrant parents too, and we always think that we have this mental block. We're like, hey, we're not supposed to be doing any of that. You know, like we're not supposed to be buying a house. You know, we're just here to work and kind of go day by day and send our kids to college. Right. You know, and it's like kind of like survive. Yeah. And those things are like, look, we have the opportunity to do great things. Yeah. You know? And everything is like, it is much more accessible now too, with just like the way the world's changing, technology. It's important to be educated on that and think bigger than just like, I just need to wake up and go to work and, you know. Yeah. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how you have been able, like mentally, how you have been able to go from yourself to a team. Like, you know, what pushed you to get there? I like my free time. Yeah. No, I mean, I think a big motivator for me in the beginning was just I wanted time back. I wanted time back to feel like I wasn't always running myself into the ground working. I wanted work-life balance, as cheesy as that sounds. And I wanted to find something that like a sense of freedom, right? It's like I'm like working for myself now, but why do I still feel like so burnt out? Like I'm still hustling and like I just can't get everything done. And so that was kind of a big push of like, you need a team. You can't do it alone. And I think that's another shift too. Like I've always been such a lone soldier in life. I'm a big sister, you know, immigrant parents. Like you're taught to just be like super independent, you know, go-getter, hustle. And having my own firm, I was like, why am I still trying to like do that, you know? And I also realized like it's not fun to do it alone. I don't want to do it alone. Yeah. And that wasn't like a hard thing to admit,
But I think another thing I had to work through was like asking for help.
Yeah.
Like I'm really bad at that. Like really bad at that because I'm like so hyper independent, a control freak, a perfectionist, like all of those things that like an older sibling is, right? And so I had to work through a lot of that. And then when I started letting go of control a little bit and delegating, I was like, oh, this feels nice. Like I can breathe. And I have a completely remote practice, so I can be anywhere and continue working. That's the nice thing about technology. I love to travel. So that was like a key motivator for me too, because I've done so much traveling in the last 3 years. It's like, it's nuts.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. I mean, I was telling you, we haven't traveled in a while. Yeah. But I mean, me and my wife, we did a ton of travel before we had the kids. And
and I also like, before I get into that phase of my life, like husband, children, and all of that stuff, like I want to have balance. You know, before, like, I want to be present if I were to ever have a family. I don't want to be, like, on my laptop all day long. I mean, I saw my parents hustle so much when I was younger. They, I think, missed out on a lot of, like, precious young years that people talk about now. Yeah. And also, those couple of years are so impressionable. It's, like, a lot of where, like, my tendencies and almost, like, traumas for, like, good and bad came from. And, like, I am the person I am because of that upbringing of just hustling and grit and resilience. But there needs to be a balance, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, one of the great things about my job, about what I do is that I'm basically, I'm all over the place, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But I have been able to spend a lot of time with my kids.
Yeah.
I've been there pretty much for everything. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I because there are some days where I go like, hey, maybe I should just go ahead and take a job someplace. And I go like, nah.
Right.
It's like, and I think about like, okay, maybe if they give me this number and this number. And then I go like, no, because it just being just able to say, okay, my kid is feeling sick, let me just go ahead and
take the time to be with them.
It's huge.
Yeah,
it's huge. And I think it's very important what you said, that hey, the reason why you decided to grow is because you want your time back.
Yeah I think that's like what being wealthy is, doing whatever you want whenever you want, doing what you love, right?
I just picked up the book. Oh my god, now it's going out that I remember, but it's basically just about the different types of wealths.
Was it the one by Sahil Bloom?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I'm kind of going black, but I have it there. I literally ordered it the other day because I was like, I ordered it last week and I just haven't gotten to it. But I was like, okay, you want to have the ability to just basically choose, when you want to do something or not.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, and that's been like the messaging these days too, right? So much of it is like I think gone is like the whole hustle culture. Now it's more like peace and presence and like, why am I doing all of this? Like for what, right?
Because it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
It's
not not like living to work, but working to live, right? Yeah. People forget the live part. The work part we've got down.
No, it's not sustainable. Like I tell many people, like even just, like off camera, we were talking about like how I had some deals go south. Mm-hmm. And I had like a week where I was like, I wasn't depressed, but I was definitely a depressed mood. Yeah. It wasn't, I wasn't feeling good. Where I was, and my wife was like, I think you should play more golf.
Yeah.
It's like, and I was like, why? Because you don't feel like you don't have that energy, and that's probably not helping you in your business. Totally. And then, and I was like, yeah, you know what? Last year I played a lot of golf, which I always play golf. That's my addiction. But it's like, okay, you know what? When I'm at peace, everything else just. Yeah. Like when you take the time to do things that you enjoy, you're automatically just a better person. Yeah. Like when I started my practice, like all I did was work. Because I was like, I have to answer every email, every phone call. I was like one of those maniacs, like emailing at 5 a.m. And my clients would like call me, and I was running my business like off my cell phone. Yeah. And, over time, I had to start putting in boundaries. And like, I'll tell you, like realtors didn't like it. Clients didn't like it. A year into my business, I stopped using my cell phone number. I finally got like a business line. I then got a receptionist to answer every single call. Mm-hmm. And at that time I was still like, yeah, you can like patch people through. But now it's like, you don't get me on demand. Like
if you want to talk to me, we schedule time to talk to me, because one, I want to be prepared when I talk to you. I want to review your file. I want to know what's going on. And sometimes whatever that call was could have been an email, you know? Yeah. People just think that their problems are urgent, and they are, but they also need to be dealt with in a specific way. And so like when I finally was okay to like set the boundaries, even I became like a better attorney. I wasn't like trying to rush people off the phone. I wasn't losing my temper, because like real estate is so high emotion. And if the client calls me yelling, then I like want to yell back. Yeah. You know? So it's been like a world of a difference.
Yeah, no, I'm actually working on that right now, because I am so used to a lot of my business is basically just giving a great customer experience.
Yeah.
And lately I've been thinking about myself where it's like, okay, I'm always answering the phone. Like sometimes if you call me like at 9 p.m. and I answer the phone, and because I'm very conscious of what the other person is feeling.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you start realizing like, look, if I'm having a conversation while my kids are like
you're not
going
like
crazy,
focused.
I'm not really focused. I'm not giving you my best. And then that's a huge toll on me, because sometimes, you know, it's just like you just don't disconnect. So it's like, you know, I'm in the middle of a lunch with my kids or my wife, and I'm just kind of like doing numbers. Hey, what do I have to do for that person?
Yeah. And it's crazy, because it's like if you can treat all of your clients like, if you can treat all of your time like it's a paying client, you know, like it's a game changer. Like I time block everything that I do. And the biggest thing has been like keeping the commitments to myself, like doing the things that I say I'm going to do, you know, like I work out 7 days a week. I meditate, like all those things that like, it's not a paying customer, but the more I keep the commitments that I make to myself, like the better habits I create, and then the better person I become, the better attorney I become, like all of that all falls into place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, let's say it's kind of like, you know, when you're in sports,
right?
You know, you need to, if you're going out there, you need to be healthy. And it's the same thing here. You know, we're dealing with high pressure transactions, because guess what? Any real estate transaction is high pressure.
It is.
You know, because the other person, it might be the $200,000 condo.
Right.
But it's a huge deal. And, you know, we need to be mentally.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? A lot of the emotions come from the fact that this is like the biggest investment someone is making. And I'm very cognizant of that. But that means I need to come in without the emotion, right? I have to come in with like the logics and the fact, and like take the emotion out of it. Yeah. Give them like a safe space, you know, to recognize it and say, I understand where you're coming from. I've seen this a million times, and that should comfort you, because I'm actually not impacted by this issue at all. I've seen it before, and this is how you solve it.
Yeah. So to start wrapping this up, and I always ask this question to all my guests. Not to everyone, but to some. But how do you handle adversity?
Adversity? Like in what sense? Like
you have a big issue that came up. Something that you were not expecting, because I feel a lot of times it's just the expectations part, but yeah, you know, it's just something that you weren't expecting, and it just throws you off. Like, how do you handle that?
You know, I think I've started to actually enjoy it, you know, the challenges that come about, because sometimes real estate can get really mundane. And the one thing about real estate attorneys is like, we do a lot of volume, right? It's different from being a lender. It's different from being a real estate agent who might do like 20, 30 deals a year. Like I do hundreds of transactions in a year, right? So when something crazy comes up, I'm actually excited. I'm like, ooh, I get to figure out a new way to solve this, you know? And one of my firm's like mottos or values is like, it's not a problem, it's a puzzle. So
I think that's one that I'm going to be posting. That's great. It's not a problem, it's a puzzle. Yeah, I think that one is huge. Yeah, I like that, because so many times we think of like a problem like it's the end of everything. Yeah, but I'm like, you know, it's not proper English, but I'm like, everything is figure outable. Yeah. That's something I would tell you. You know, many times I had issues where I go like, oh my God, this is, you know, I have to tell this client that this is not going to go through, or they're going to have to come out with more money. And it's something that it hits me hard. And then I used to go ahead and not make the call until the afternoon or until the next morning. And then the client was like, okay. I'm like, oh my God, I just killed myself for like 24 hours thinking, and now it's like, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but listen, I really want to thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, this is great.
I mean, this was great. I look forward to working with you.
Me too.
Definitely, I'll be reaching out after June 30th, when my wife is. Because, estate planning is something that I think at my age, I'm about to be 40, and just so many people
So important.
start thinking about it, but it's something that people should start thinking about earlier.
Yep.
Just because you just never know what happens.
Yeah. And preparation is key.
Yeah.
And once you do the heavy lifting the first time around, after that, it's just every 3 years, we'll check in, make sure everything's up to snuff,
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Of course.
And this was fun.
Yes,
Thank you.
it was.
That's it.